Good day and welcome to another edition of Literature and the Arts. Today we'll be discussing another fantastic topic titled Japa, Patterns of Migration in the African Novel. Japa, Patterns of Migration in the African Novel. Of course, to many Nigerians, the concept of Japa is not new. It's a colloquial way of talking about relocation to find greener pasture, usually in Europe and America. So when a Nigerian says, I want to japa, it simply means he wants to relocate from an economically disadvantaged country like Nigeria to a more advanced country, usually Europe or America. However, the word Japa is from the Yoruba tribe in Nigeria. Taking it literally, it will mean to escape, to free yourself from a particular bondage, to seek help, to seek support. It means to just run away, to escape for yourself. So that's what this, so to a great extent, it's as if migration in Africa is synonymous with Japa. That is, when you talk about migration, the synonym, particularly in Africa, is Japa, that is escape. But the purpose of this video is to argue this point, that the concept of migration, that is relocation from Africa to Europe, through history has not always followed the pattern of Japa. In fact, the concept of Japa, that is escaping from the social and economic problems in Africa to Europe, is a latest post-colonial development. Of course, migration is a human phenomenon. All through history, there is movement, relocation of human beings from one place to the other. If you look at the Bible, you will see as far back as the book of Genesis, God told Abraham that, in fact, if you look at the first family, God told them, sent them out of the Garden of Eden. That's migration. God told Abraham to leave his father's house, and he should go to the land he's going to show him. So Abraham migrated, because it's still in the book of Genesis that Jacob, when he heard that his son was now flourishing in Egypt, he relocated with his family from Canaan to Egypt. And in the book of Exodus, we see that for hundreds of years, the Israelites were under the bondage of the Egyptians. But one day they relocated to Canaan, back to Canaan. However, bringing it to the concept of migration in Africa, like I said earlier, that migration in Africa has not always come with the concept of Japa. We'll see before independence in many African countries, the form of migration that existed then was the slave trade, where Africans were bought, shipped as slaves to Europe to go and take care to become slaves on their plantations. That was a form or a pattern of migration that existed then. However, as colonialism started, when it was getting to the 1950s, 1960s, because many African countries, even Nigeria, got their independence in the 1960s. So many of towards the 1950s, 1940s, many Africans went to Europe, not necessarily to Japa, but their form of migration was to go to Europe to get the education and then having education as a tool to fight the colonizers. And then through that education, they also were equipped to come and lead their people after independence. So the purpose why many Africans went to Europe at that time was not to Japa, because many the form of migration that is existing now, which is the Japa syndrome, the point of migration is not to return, it is to settle in the place they have migrated to. However, during the 1940s, late 1940s, 1950s, and early 60s, we will see that the migration that existed then was just to get education, because education is perceived as a tool or as power then, as a means of getting power. So the young Africans at that time went to Europe to get education. We'll see the likes of Awolowo, the likes of Nnamdi Azikiwe, the Leopold Sedar Sengos of this world, Kwame Nkrumahs of this world, Augustina Neto of Angola. They all went to Europe purposely to get education. We'll see that Awolowo became a lawyer, and so on like that. So they went to get education, which was the power with which they used in confronting the colonizers. And so, getting independence, that same education equipped them to be the leaders of their people. For example, Kwame Nkrumah became the first president of Ghana. Augustino Neto, the president of Angola. Obafemi Awolowo became the premier of the southern region at that time. So education at that time was a means of empowerment, such that they can confront the colonizers. You know, like the story of Chinua Achebe, where the character tells his son that he wants him to go and learn the language of and the power of the white man, so he can come and teach him, so they can attack the white man. So the same way it is, the young Africans at that time, their form of migration was not to settle in Europe or America. Their form of migration was to go and get equipped enough to confront the colonizers and then return back with the tool to rule and lead their people. Or, you know, when we bring it to the context of the African novel, you know, I said in one of our earlier videos, where we were talking about the importance of introducing your children to reading novels early. For those of you who haven't listened to that, I would like you to check some of our videos. You will see that video there. You know, we said one of the importance of making your children read novels is that novels chronicles the history of a people. You know, and when you make your children read novels, they will, of course, they are reading something interesting. At the same time, they are interacting and become more aware of the history of where they come from. So when bringing it to the African context, of course, we have contemporary novels that talk about migration. However, these contemporary novels on migration, their emphasis of their consideration or what they consider migration as the Japa mentality. They're trying to escape to countries of greener pastures from Africa. Novelists like Chimamanda Adichie, Nyovole Bulawayo, Elona Bila, and some other novelists, African novelists like that, their concept of migration as the Japa syndrome to it. However, when you consider earlier novels like Buchi Emecheta's Second Class Citizen, that novel is a very powerful piece, an interesting one that talks about migration. However, it gives us a picture to migration in the 1950s and early 60s. So during the time many African nations got their independence. In that novel, we will see that the Africans who went to Europe, particularly England, to study, their aim of going to England was to get empowered such that they will come home and get political positions that are vacant at that time so that they can come and rule their people. For example, the narrator, who is Ada, talks about one lawyer, Nweze, who went to England to study law, and he was welcomed with pomps and pageantries when he returned back as a lawyer. And one of the things that Ada says was that he's coming back home to come and take up political position and fight for their people. We will see that Ada herself, the purpose of going to England was to go and get education and then return back home, because there were many vacant positions at that time in Nigeria and many African nations where the educated, the elites, those who study abroad, can come back home to come and take those positions. We'll see, they also talked about when Ada gets to England, she saw people like Pa Noble, who also went to England to, at that time, the people who refused to come back home are people who did not succeed in their quest of becoming probably a lawyer or whatever they went to study. So the people who return back home are those who actually completed their studies over there, and then they return home, and because they are the most educated in their family or in their town, they are welcomed by everyone and seen as people who will fight their cause politically. So we can see that. So the concept of Japa in migration came in the 1980s, 1990s, when the economical state of Nigeria began to become worrisome. When we began to see the military incursion into the politics, when politicians became more like robbers, and it was affecting the economy of the country, we now began to see migration as Japa. Look at when Abacha was the head of state. People like the present president of Nigeria, Bola Ahmed Tinubu, Wole Soyinka, Fayemi, and so on like that, they had to escape to Europe. That is what we actually call Japa. They had to run away. They had to escape so that they would not die. We saw many scholars in Nigeria like that. So when you read Elon Abila's Oil on Water, Waiting for an Angel, you will see such concept of Japa during that period of military rule in Nigeria. That is where the Japa syndrome began. And of course, it moved from those who were running away from being attacked or killed by military men to people who now started running away because of economic issues. Also in other African countries, you will see that the civil war in countries like Somalia, Uganda, and so on like that, a writer like Nuruddin Farah had to seek asylum outside in Europe because of the civil war, the terrorism that was in Somalia at that time. You know, during the reign of Idi Amin, we could see many Ugandans running away The problem in Zimbabwe, as you will see in the novel of Novelle Bulawayo, we need new names. We will see that kind of Japa migration, people seeking solace everywhere. But the purpose of this novel is to tell us that, to inform us that Japa is a post-colonial phenomenon. Japa migration in Africa has not always followed the Japa syndrome. Earlier in the 1950s, 1960s, people who migrated solely to get educational empowerment so that they can come home and then be rulers and leaders of their people. Thank you for listening to this edition of Literature and Art. Our subsequent videos will still be to discover and unpack this concept of migration in the African novel. Thank you for listening. God bless you.